I'm Brian Becker, the manager of the APL Tools group at Dyalog, and today we're going to talk about some of the things we've been doing to help you build web applications in Dyalog. And this is brought to you by the APL Tools group. Our job is to provide you tools that make it easier for you to do your job. And so there's some APL tools. So what I'm going to talk about is, what are we talking about? The challenges that we face developing web applications, our goals, and hopefully they overlap fairly well with the goals that you have. If they don't, let us know. And then we'll talk a little bit about web services and web servers. In particular, with web services, we'll talk about our SAWS tool, which provides web services. And for web server, we'll talk about the MiServer. And I apologize to anybody that attended to yesterday's workshops. There will be some overlap of material, but hopefully we'll get to some new stuff as well. So the challenges, well, and I've shown this slide now for, a year and a half, maybe 2 years, and it's actually changed a little bit because, I'll show you. First of all, there's a lot of APL functionality that we have in data that is difficult to make available to the rest of the world. There's also a lot of stuff outside of the realm of APL that is sometimes difficult for us to make use of. So the World Wide Web gives us an excellent tool for expanding functionality, for developing new functionality, and for providing our functionality to other people. But in a lot of cases, it can be difficult, or it can be a considerable investment to learn the technologies necessary to integrate APL on the web. And then this is the new point this year. It's also that APL is foreign to many web-savvy people. So our goals then is to make it easier for APLers to write web applications. And also to make it easier for web people to use APL to write web applications. And we don't want to reinvent the wheel, which means we want to integrate mainstream technologies. And we want to try and provide an interface to you that makes them natural for an APLer to use, yet make the underlying power of the tools that we're interfacing to available to you in a more sophisticated fashion. And I've got a little example of that someplace. Okay, this is jQuery's date picker routine. And the basic behavior, I'll display the code that makes this page, but basically I'm calling our date picker interface function, and all I'm doing is giving it an ID that I want it to assign the date to. So that's the simple form. I'm also calling date picker here, but giving it more arguments that tell us a little bit more about how to format the date and what sort of inputs to accept. And so if I run this page now, the basic date picker functionality looks like date pickers that you've seen everywhere, but the more advanced allows us to do drop-downs on the month and year, and then it also formats the date a little bit differently. So you've not only got a very simple and hopefully common use case that you don't have to provide any additional information for, but you've got the full capabilities of jQuery's date picker available to you. So that's what we mean when we want to try and provide you with a simple and intuitive interface that's APL-like, yet give you access to the underlying power. So another thing that I've been talking about for a couple of years has been the difference between web servers and web services. And so a web server is a server that receives HTTP requests and returns HTML. So think web browser, Google Chrome, Internet Explorer, Firefox, your mobile phone. And a web service uses HTTP to receive function calls and returns results, generally in the form of XML. SOAP is one of the standards that is used to provide web services. So in this case, you think process to process, where if you've ever done any kind of shipping cost calculation when you've ordered something from the web, or an address verification, or a zip code lookup, anything like that, that's generally some sort of a web service that the web page that you're looking at is making a call to some other service, getting the information and then returning it eventually to you via the web. So that's a combination of web server and web service. So MiServer is a web server, and SAWS is a standalone web service framework. Okay? And both are pure APL and standalone applications with an alpha. Okay. And by that, standalone means it doesn't require any other server technology. You don't need Microsoft IIS, Apache, IBM WebSphere, or any other web server technology to run either of these products. All you need is an open port and some network connectivity, and of course Dyalog APL. And by pure APL, we mean that it's written in APL by APLers for APLers. The code is open source and available to you. You can take it, modify it, extend it. If you do something really neat, hopefully you'll share it back with us and we'll incorporate it. But so it's APL-based. So let's talk about web services real quick. I have a laser pointer. Maybe I can even use it. Maybe not. Okay, so there's a client. That's maybe it might be a process. It might be somebody sitting in a web browser. They request a service that's based on the description of the web service, which is written in a thing called WSDL, which stands for very good Web Service Description Language. And generally, at least in our case, that's going to be wrapped up in a SOAP request. And SOAP used to stand for something, but it now stands for nothing other than SOAP. The server receives the request, and it parses the request based on the WSDL, and if it's a valid request, it'll run the service, format the result according to the WSDL, send it back to the requester, and they've got their answer. So, what's all that look like? Web services use WSDL, and that's what WSDL looks like. And if you had to type that in by hand, you would begin to hate life. It uses HTTP and SOAP. So here's a HTTP wrapped SOAP request. And again, these things, if you had to try and build them, it would be an arduous task. And so SOAP, or SAWS, hides the complexity of having to deal with WSDL and SOAP and HTTP. You describe your web service using simple matrices, and it describes the operations, their arguments, and the results. So this is a description for a simple web service in SAWS. So we have the method, and that is just the name of an APL function that gets executed when we receive a request for that method. This is the result is going to be either the result of the expression. This takes an APL expression, which is a simple string, and it either returns the result of the string or an error message. And that's it. That's a fully functional web service description in SAWS. So let me talk quickly about the benefits, and I'll show you a little bit of SAWS. First of all, you're able to consume third-party web services. There are a wide variety of web services that are available both for free and by subscription out on the web. And they can do almost every imaginable thing. If you search do a Google search for free web services, you'll find a lot of hits. The other thing you can do with SAWS is provide web services. And the nice thing about providing web service with SAWS, because we use the standards, anybody that can write a client for a SOAP-based web service can use your web service. So you're alleviated from the burden of having to provide the client side of the transaction. So anybody writing F#, C#, Java, JavaScript, whatever, Visual Basic, can access your web service. So this can give legacy applications access to the web, and you can build new service-oriented applications. And then you can take a number of existing functions or services and combine them together to do some sort of a mashup. The other nice thing about SAWS is it is platform independent. It'll run essentially wherever Dyalog 12.1 or later runs. It uses Conga, our TCP IP communications tool, as its communications mechanism, and so as long as you can run Dyalog 12.1 and Conga, you can use SAWS. So let's go back to okay, well, this is using a web service client. I'm actually accessing a global web service or a global weather web service. So you can pick any country. Let's go for our friends from the Ukraine. Why don't we find out what weather's like at home? So where in the Ukraine are people from? Kiev? Okay. So that would be, I guess that's Kiev, yes? Okay, so it's a balmy 53 or 12C there. Winds are from the east-southeast at 4 miles an hour. So this is just making a simple call out to a publicly available web service. So SAWS Future. One of the things we want to do is to release a new, more object-oriented method for defining web services. The defining your web services with with simple matrices works well for simple web services, but for more complicated ones, we want to provide an object-oriented methodology and to handle more complex requests. Morton, when he was doing some work earlier this year, showed me kind of a shorthand for defining web services that he had prototyped, which uses kind of a signature type of approach. If you've ever used any of the .NET interface, the signature stuff in that, it looks very much like that, and I'm afraid I don't understand it well enough to talk competently about it, but that's something that we may use to provide very simple web services. We would like to build a WSDL parser so that you can take the WSDL that describes a third-party web service, run it through the parser, and then it will build an APL wrapper that you can just call to access those web services without having to parse the WSDL yourself and figure out how to construct its arguments. That's a non-trivial task. I don't know how successful we'll be at it, but it would be something that we'd really like to do. And then there are other web service frameworks out there in addition to the SOAP-based ones. There's REST, there are other ones, and if they're important to you for us to develop, let us know and we'll put it on the list. So, now on to MiServer, which that is running. For a couple of years now, we've been talking about MiServer, and I've been calling it a web server, and I realized in the shower the other day, don't try and visualize that, you'll either go blind or insane, but I tried to visualize, or I thought that we've really been selling MiServer short. It is a web server, but it's a lot more than that. It's an extensible web server framework, which means that you can add your own features to it. It's also a web application server, so you can provide a web interface to new and existing APL applications. The Dyalog file server that Morton's going to show later this week uses the MiServer for its administration console. And SQAPL Remote has a MiServer monitor interface. So it's good for building application interfaces that aren't necessarily intended for web delivery, but if you want to be able to manage an APL process or an APL application via a browser, MiServer is a good way to do that. And the other thing that MiServer is this ever-growing suite of tools that are designed to help you build web content. What are some of the benefits of MiServer? Well, it's easy to install and deploy. It's standalone. All you need is an open port in Dyalog APL. The configuration is maintained in XML files, so you can edit how MiServer is configured very easily. Again, it's open source and extensible, and we'd encourage you to extend it, and again, to share those extensions with us so that we can, as a community, make these offerings better. All of the code is in scripted files. So that means that you can use almost any text editor to maintain the code. You can use other text utilities to merge files, to compare files, to manage things. It means you can use source code management utilities like SVN and Git to manage your software development process. And that's, when I first heard about scripted files several years ago, I kind of poo-pooed the idea. But now, having been using them for a while, I think it's really the way to develop APL applications. It's faster, it's more reliable, and it's easier to extend and modify code. So now we're going to talk a little bit about a web server serves up web pages. So in APL, or in MiServer, every user gets their own session, and for each session, for every page a user accesses, they get an instance of the page class. And if that page has any public fields or properties, MiServer knows enough to copy any form variables that are sent with the HTTP request into those fields and properties in the class. So you don't have to do anything to extract that data from the HTTP request. So, and so here we have a simple reverse page, and we've got two fields, name and action. Name is the name that we've assigned to the edit field that somebody will put in their name, and action is the name we've given to the submit buttons to do either reverse the name or clear the input field. So you'd see something like that, and this is what the HTML that gets rendered would look like. And so you can see that there's a button here called action and a text field here called name. And okay, and what would happen is when the APL code executes, it will it'll go ahead and populate those, and you can manipulate them directly in your function. Okay, the other thing that we've done is to integrate jQuery into MiServer, and really interesting UI is difficult to do on the web in just raw HTML. And JavaScript is a scripting language that almost every browser available supports, and you can use that to make interesting UIs. But we really don't want to spend the time to learn a lot of JavaScript. And jQuery is a JavaScript library that does a lot of things. But the nice thing about it is it's cross-platform and cross-browser, which means that all of the different flavors of browser, Internet Explorer, Google Chrome, Firefox, Apple Safari, Opera, they all treat things a little bit differently. And it's a pain, if you've ever had to do any web work, to try and get browsers to act similarly on under similar conditions. And the nice thing about jQuery is it takes care of that for you. And the other thing is it has a very broad user community. It's open source, it's freely redistributable, so we've included jQuery and the jQuery interface with MiServer. Now, jQuery UI is a jQuery library that provides a lot of neat visual effects. And jQuery Mobile is a library that's targeted at mobile platforms. So let's take a tour of MiServer. Okay, this is the MiServer website, or my site, that's distributed with the conference materials. And the first thing you'll notice is that you can click on the ship. Now, it's not a worm anymore, it's now a ship. But you can click on the ship to see the underlying APL code that implements that particular page. And in this case, you can see that I'm reading, basically I'm reading an XML file that's got a description of all the examples that I want to show on my home page. So that's all of the code to render this page. I'm sorry? Can you increase the font? Can I increase the font? I think so. Better? Okay. So the first thing is we can serve up basic HTML pages. This is just a static HTML page. It's in a file, basic.page.html, and it's pretty boring. Well, we can now serve up that same page that looks just as boring with an APL script file. So we're able to do things that are just as boring as plain old HTML, which is, I guess it's not much of an accomplishment, but it's included for demonstration purposes. But now I can take that same page, so if we look at basic page, or it's called plain Dyalog. So this is the page that you just saw. This is the code that generates it. And you'll notice that the page itself is based on a class called mildPage, which does absolutely no adornment to the page. So if we were to change that page to use a template called myPage, and now that comes later. So now if we use the template using the myPage, you now get it formatted with a banner and a footer and the ship. And unfortunately, the home button is now scrolled off the screen. So here's a simple myPage with the form. This is the reverse text example. And again, the code just has two fields, name and action, that are populated and acted upon down here in do action. If the action is clear, name is cleared. If the action is reversed, name is reversed. So if I type in Dyalog and I hit reverse, it goes to GoLaid. And if I hit clear, it clears it. So that makes it really easy to work with form data from HTML forms. I'm going to skip over the calculation and graphics, but you're free to play with this in the code that you can download from the conference website. But I want to talk about jQuery and some of the tools that we have for jQuery. The first is the date picker, which you've already seen. The accordion can present a variety of text in an accordion-style fashion. And because I'm going to shrink this a little bit so that we can get it all on the screen. So it's just different kinds of, and this was last year's worm, sorry. If you select no, but so this is an example of a jQuery object called a dialog. These interactions are pretty slick, and if you had to do these with some of the Quad WC GUI tools, particularly the accordion style. So we can take that same content though and present it as a series of tabs. And we can make the tab sensitive to when we mouse over a particular tab, it switches it automatically without me clicking anything. Then there's Sortable, which provides a drag and drop type of interface. So if you're into, I know Jerry Brennan builds some games that could make use of this type of functionality, and we can show you an example with the shopping cart here that uses both the accordion and the drag and drop capability, where you can drag items into a shopping cart and it will update it. So now, one of the things that we've recently, we were providing a utility, and we still provide it, called Table Sorter, and it's designed to present tables and allow them to be sorted. But we found a better tool that we've recently incorporated into MiServer, and so I'll show that on this page. What I've got here is we have an interface to our SQAPL product, which allows you to define a data source to your MySite and then just refer to that by the data source name. So we've simplified a lot of the SQL actions of having to do the connect and bind variables and execute a statement and get the result back. That's now hidden from you, or you don't have to bother with it. You can if you choose to. All of the underlying capability is still there. But I took a zip codes database for the US and ported it to Microsoft Access. So this is an Access database running locally. And the first thing I'll do is select I'll do Hawaii again, just in honor of Jerry. But so this brings up all the zip codes in Hawaii. And then I'm going to select one of them and click on that. And this will bring up, this now has taken that zip code, and it's called a U.S. National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration, basically the weather service in the U.S. It's called their web service using SAWS to first get the latitude and longitude for that zip code, and then get the weather forecast for that latitude and longitude. So we can see that it's going to be, well, really humid in Hawaii and pretty darn warm. And the winds are going to be, I guess mostly from the east and south. So this is an example of integrating with a data source using SQL and also calling out to a web service and then producing graphics in RainPro. So the next thing I want to show you is we put in event handling over the last year in MiServer, JavaScript event handling. And so we call it JQ on. And what we've done is you can basically define handlers for any type of event on any document object model node in your web page. So if I click on this cell, it will replace the contents with quad TS. If I click on this cell, it will append the quad TS to the contents. If I click on this cell, it will prepend. And if I click on this cell, it's going to execute some JavaScript to change the background color. And that was pretty neat. I said, wow, that's impressive. I can do one thing in response to an event. And then I got to thinking, why can't I do multiple things? And so as we were developing the monitor for DFS, I discovered a way to do multiple things. So now if I click on here, it's going to bring up an alert box and also append quad TS to the bottom of the page. So there's our alert box, there's our quad TS. And you can string as many things to do. You can replace multiple areas on your web page. You can execute multiple bits of JavaScript, and that all gets done on the client. The next thing that we're kind of excited about and will be releasing in the not too distant future is, well, first of all, how many people, by a show of hands, have some sort of a smartphone with them? Okay, probably 70, 80%. Okay. Well, we are working on integrating jQuery's mobile platform. All right, so here's when I first made this work, I said, wow, that's cool. And then I said, this means that I can take a simple piece of APL code that I develop and make it available to everybody in the world that has a smartphone, a tablet, an internet-connected PC. And that kind of made me smile, but it also kind of gave me some chills, just it's a little scary. This makes it very easy for you to deliver mobile apps based in APL across the web. So how many people have seen John Scholl's Game of Life video on YouTube? Okay, good. That's a good number. And so one of the things I wanted to do was to see if we could implement that in MiServer. So if you haven't seen the video, you can link to it here and take a look at it. We won't go through it now. But we actually had to slow down. This is using the event handling in APL. So every generation of here is a call back to the server. And so when I was showing Andy this the other day, he said, well, why don't you show what's going on the server? Because this is just the client running. So in order to do that, we will move that over there. We will we will take a look at the variable board here. So, and if I do this right, and very cleverly, is somebody running Game of Life? No. Yes? Thank you. Okay, so I'm going, what's going on? Okay, so whoever's running Game of Life, thank you very much. That's what's going on in the client, hopefully on your browser. Yes, this is why I don't give out my IP address until after I've gone through this part of the demo. But basically, if we reset and start again, you'll see that the green screen is the server, the browser is the client, and it's pretty darn quick. Yeah, this is with a delay. We slowed it down.
What's going on in the server when there are 3 or 4 people running with life?
Well, right now this is just updating. Well, this is what will go on when more than one person does it. Right now, it's just updating a variable in root, so all instances are pointing to that same variable.
Ah, right. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. No. Everybody is seeing their correct version on here. This is just a single. This is just a variable that I threw into the root to demonstrate the server activity. So, okay. One of the neat things. Nope, don't want to save it. Okay, so back to PowerPoint slideshow. All right, so things that are coming soon. Well. And this is something some people have asked for, and it's something that we're really excited about. It's handler mapping for IIS and Apache web servers. Now, what's that mean? Okay, this allows you to put MiServer as a document handler behind either Apache or IIS, which means that you get any benefit that either of those web servers bring in terms of scalability, in terms of security, in terms of logging and management, but you still have the power of using APL to develop your web content. So in here, the user would request some sort of a Dyalog resource through either IIS or Apache. That would be mapped to be passed off to MiServer to be handled. MiServer will render the HTML, send it back to IIS or Apache, and then they send it on to the browser. This is still a work in progress, but you'll notice that localhost, I've got an instance of IIS running here. And if I do localhost / MiServer, server, granted it's not very impressive yet, but let me show you. Here's the source code that generates that page, right? And in case you doubt that that's actually serving up this page, we'll say, welcome to Dyalog 12, save it, refresh. So we've got the communications mechanism working. We still have to work on some configuration issues, but so coming soon, handler mapping. And then jQuery mobile, we're still building out that library. And then based on the work that we're doing with jQuery mobile, I just want to show you this real quick. We're building the jQuery mobile pages a little bit differently. And we're using kind of an object-oriented approach to building the HTML content. So here we're creating a new instance of a jQuery mobile framework. We're adding a page to it. We're adding a header to that page, and we're adding radio groups and so on to the page. And basically, this allows us to do function chaining. And at least in the workshop the other day, it got some favorable responses. And so if again, download the sample MiServer from the conference website and take a look at it and give us feedback, because I think this is how we're going to start crafting the tools that construct HTML. And with that, we want to continue to harden MiServer, make it more industrial, make it more robust, so that it's, you can reliably deploy it. And then you tell us what else we should be doing. So, thank you.